Here is your fully fresh script. Hurricane season 2026 forecast dropped. CSU predicts El Niño will silence the Atlantic. Or will it? Okay guys, this just dropped. April 9th, 2026. Colorado State University, the institution that invented hurricane season forecasting, released their first official outlook for the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season. And the headline says, "Quiet year coming. El Niño is going to suppress the Atlantic. Below average activity, fewer storms, fewer major hurricanes. Breathe easy. Except, there is a but buried inside this forecast that nobody is talking about. A hidden window, a danger period that the headline completely misses, and a history lesson from 2023 that should be keeping every coastal resident absolutely wide awake. So do not close this video when you hear the good news, because the good news has an asterisk, a very significant asterisk, and I am going to show you exactly what it is. First, the forecast itself, because you need to know exactly what CSU said, word for word, number by number. We anticipate that the 2026 Atlantic Basin hurricane season will have somewhat below normal activity. Current weak La Niña conditions are likely to transition to El Niño in the next few months, with the potential for a moderate to strong El Niño for the peak of hurricane season. Colorado State University, below normal. That is the headline. But let me give you the specific numbers. CSU's Tropical Cyclones, Radar, Atmospheric Modeling, and Software team forecasts 13 named storms, of which 6 are expected to become hurricanes and 2 to reach major hurricane strength. Colo State 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 2 major hurricanes, Category 3 or above, and compare that to what an average year looks like. This is below average when compared to the Atlantic seasonal average of 14.4 named storms, 7.2 hurricanes, and 3.2 major hurricanes. CBS 12. So CSU is predicting roughly 1 fewer hurricane, 1 fewer major hurricane. And the total storm energy, CSU expects an ACE value of 90, well below the average of 123. Lower ACE generally means storms are either weaker, shorter-lived, or both. CBS 12 ACE, accumulated cyclone energy, is how we measure the total destructive power of a season. The average is 123. CSU is forecasting 90. About 75% of the historical average. That is a meaningfully quieter season on paper. This is the fewest number of storms they've predicted since 2019. AOL, fewest predicted since 2019. And this is the 43rd year CSU has issued this forecast. Since the late Professor Bill Gray launched it in 1984. These people know what they are doing. So when they say quiet, that carries weight. Now here is the reason why. The mechanism, the science. Because understanding the why is what separates you from everyone else who just reads the headline number and moves on. El Niño. That is the word that explains everything in this forecast. CSU anticipates wind shear, the change in wind speed or direction with height across the tropical Atlantic will be the second highest since 1981, trailing only the 2015 season. Fox Weather, second highest since 1981. Let me explain what wind shear actually does to a hurricane. Imagine you are trying to build a spinning top, a perfect cone of rotating wind. That is what a hurricane needs to be. Organized, vertical, symmetrical. Now imagine someone blows a powerful fan horizontally across the top. The fan tilts it, leans it over, breaks the symmetry. The hurricane cannot organize, cannot intensify, gets torn apart before it becomes dangerous. That horizontal fan, that is vertical wind shear. And El Niño creates that shear at massive scale across the entire tropical Atlantic and Caribbean. High vertical wind shear acts to tilt or rip apart developing tropical systems, preventing them from organizing into powerful hurricanes. It is the development of strong El Niño conditions that will help develop the shear. Fox weather, rip apart. That is the phrase. The Atlantic becomes a graveyard for would-be hurricanes. Systems that try to spin up get torn apart before they can become a threat. That is what CSU is predicting for the peak season of 2026. Now, I want to be upfront. I predicted this was coming. Several weeks ago, when I was covering the Super El Niño formation in the Pacific, I said, watch what this does to the Atlantic hurricane season. Because that is what El Niño does. It suppresses the Atlantic while it empowers the Pacific. And now here is CSU confirming it officially. On April 9th, 2026, with actual numbers, with an actual forecast. And the analog seasons they chose to compare 2026 to are fascinating. So far, the 2026 hurricane season is exhibiting characteristics similar to the 2006, 2009, 2015, and 2023 seasons, said Phil Klotzbach, a senior research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at CSU and lead author of the report. WAFB, those 4 years. I want to spend a moment on each, because each one tells you something different about what 2026 could actually look like. 2006, below average season, 9 named storms, 5 hurricanes, 2 major, El Niño dominated. The system worked as predicted, quiet year. 2009, below average season, 9 named storms, 3 hurricanes, 2 major. Again, El Niño suppressed, the system worked. 2015, below average season, 11 named storms, 4 hurricanes, 2 major, one of the strongest El Niños on record. The shear was extreme, the Atlantic was quiet. But there was a Category 4 hurricane that year, Joaquin. It missed the U.S. mainland, but it devastated the Bahamas, killed 34 people, sank the cargo ship El Faro, killing all 33 people on board in a quiet year. And then there is 2023. This is the one that should make every coastal resident sit up, because 2023 was an El Niño year. CSU predicted a below-average season. And then the Atlantic had 20 named storms, 7 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes, way above average, despite El Niño. How? The same fight played out in 2023. El Niño was in full effect, but Atlantic sea surface temperatures were at record levels. The warm water won. That season produced 20 named storms, well above average. Ocean temperatures in 2026 should be warm, but not at 2023 levels. 92.9, the lake. The warm water won. In 2023, the Atlantic was so warm, the fuel was so abundant, that storms powered through the shear. They formed anyway, intensified anyway, became major anyway. And CSU's own lead researcher acknowledges this directly. While the average of our analog seasons is somewhat below normal, the large spread in observed activity in our analog years highlights the high levels of uncertainty that typically are associated with our early April outlook, Klotzbach said. WSVN large spread, high levels of uncertainty. He is being honest. He is saying, our analogs range from well below average to somewhat above average. The number we give you, 13 storms, is the average of a very wide range. Not a guarantee, an educated estimate, with significant error bars on both sides. Now here's the part I have been building toward, the part the headlines are not covering, the hidden danger window. While a strong El Niño is expected for the 2026 season, it will likely not be at full force during the early summer months. This creates a period of high unpredictability for states like Texas and Louisiana. Fox weather high unpredictability. For Texas and Louisiana, the early summer window, June and early July, before El Niño has fully developed, before the shear shield is in place. During that window, the Atlantic is essentially unprotected. During these months, we typically lack the African wave train, which is the steady stream of disturbances moving off the African coast. These are the disturbances that fuel major Atlantic hurricanes. In the interim, the focus shifts entirely to development close to home. Fox weather, close to home, the Gulf of Mexico. Today, water temperatures in Gulf of America are already running above average, providing a source of fuel for any system that manages to spin up. Fox weather, already above average. Right now, April, 2 months before hurricane season even officially starts, and during the early season window when El Niño's shear is not yet fully active. A storm that forms in the Gulf of Mexico does not have to travel far, does not have to cross hostile shear environments. It just forms, right there, close to the coast, close to people. In an ENSO neutral state, the hostile upper-level winds are not yet consistent enough to shred developing systems in the Gulf. This lack of wind shear, combined with exceptionally warm local waters, means even a weak disturbance can quickly organize near the shoreline. That is the phrase that should make everyone from Texas to Florida uncomfortable. A weak disturbance, warm water, no shear, no African wave train to compete with, and the coast is right there. Remember Hurricane Michael in 2018? It went from a tropical depression to Category 5 at landfall in 3 days. 3 days. And it made landfall at Mexico Beach, Florida, devastating everything in its path. That is what can happen when warm Gulf water is available and shear is low, even in a quiet season, even with El Niño looming. Now let me take you to the landfall probability numbers, because these are the numbers that matter most. Not how many storms form, how many storms hit. The report includes the following: probability of major hurricanes making landfall in 2026, 32% for the entire U.S. coastline. The average is 43%. 15% for the U.S. East Coast, including the Florida Peninsula. The average is 21%. 20% for the Gulf Coast from the Florida Panhandle westward to Brownsville, Texas. The average is 27%. 35% for the Caribbean. The average is 47%. Colot State, 32% chance of a major hurricane hitting the entire U.S. coastline, down from the historical average of 43%. But let me say that plainly, 32%. That is not zero. That is not even close to zero. That is roughly 1 in 3 in a below average year. 1 in 3 chance a Category 3 or higher hurricane makes landfall on the American coast. And for the Caribbean, 35%, more than 1 in 3. CSU has set the probability of a major hurricane tracking through the Caribbean at 35%, down from the 47% average. Fox Weather, down from 47%, but still 35%. And last year, 2025, Hurricane Melissa made landfall in Jamaica as a Category 5. The most significant hurricane of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season was Hurricane Melissa, which made landfall as a Category 5 hurricane in Jamaica, resulting in nearly $9 billion in damage and causing 95 fatalities across the Caribbean. WAFB, 95 people dead, $9 billion in damage, Category 5 at landfall, in Jamaica, last year. And that was in a season with an ACE of 105% of average. This year, ACE forecast is 75% of average. But those 95 families who lost someone to Melissa, they do not care about percentages. Now, I want to introduce you to something that nobody else is covering, the AI element. CSU also noted that this was the first year they incorporated an AI-based forecast model to generate their seasonal projections. Fox Weather, first year. CSU used artificial intelligence in their hurricane season forecast. The model is called the AI2 Climate Emulator, ACE2, a machine learning system that runs on predicted sea surface temperatures from the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts. And what did the AI say? CSU's traditional statistical model calls for a slightly above average season, but every other model the team uses, including ACE2, points toward below average activity. 92.9 the lake. Every other model, including the AI, pointed toward below average. The AI aligned with the human forecasters. That is significant, because AI does not rely on the same statistical patterns as human forecasters. It finds its own signal in the data. And when AI and traditional models agree, the confidence level rises. But here is the thing I want to sit with for a moment. The traditional statistical model, the human-built one, said slightly above average. Every other model said below average. The team went with below average, the majority. But that traditional statistical model is not wrong. It is picking up on something. Probably the warmth in the Western Atlantic, the same warmth that overrode El Niño in 2023. And let me now talk about the battle at the heart of this forecast, because CSU named it themselves, the tug of war. On one side, El Niño, building in the Pacific, creating wind shear, the shield, the hurricane killer, forecast to produce the second highest shear levels in the Atlantic since 1981. On the other side, the Atlantic Ocean. The Western Atlantic, including the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, is running warmer than the long-term average, conditions that typically fuel storms. However, the Eastern Atlantic remains slightly cooler. KFOX 95.5 Western warm, Eastern slightly cool, mixed signals. The warm Western Atlantic provides fuel. The cooler Eastern Atlantic suppresses formation of the African wave train that creates most major hurricanes. El Niño provides the shear, but the warm western waters provide the energy. Which wins? CSU's team believes El Niño will be the dominant force this time, particularly if a moderate to strong event develops. KFOX 95.5. Particularly if. Those two words do enormous work in that sentence. If El Niño develops into a moderate to strong event by the peak season, the shear wins. The Atlantic is suppressed. 13 storms. But if El Niño is late, if it does not develop fully until October, then there is a long window, June, July, August, where the warm Atlantic water is the dominant force, and that warm water can produce storms, major ones. Now, here's what I want you to understand about the timing problem, because this is the critical insight. CSU forecasters qualified that exactly when El Niño forms will play an almost equal role in how much of the hurricane season is suppressed. Fox weather, almost equal role to the strength of El Niño. The timing matters as much as the intensity. Think of it this way. The shear shield needs to be in place by August, September at the latest. Because the statistical peak of the Atlantic hurricane season is September 10th. That is when historically the most powerful storms form. If El Niño is developing but not yet strong enough by August, September becomes the danger month. The window when the fuel is maximum, water temperature is at peak, and the shear shield is not yet fully deployed. That intersection, that gap, is where the nightmare scenario lives. Not for 13 storms, for one, the right one, in the right place, at the right moment. And now, I want to say something that every forecaster says, and that I want you to actually hear this time, not just read, really hear. It takes only one storm near you to make this an active season for you, said Michael Bell, a professor in the Department of Atmospheric Science at CSU. One storm near you. That is the sentence, the most important sentence in the entire CSU forecast. Not 13, not 6, not 2, 1. One storm near you. That is all it takes. And let me give you the history that proves this is not just a disclaimer. In 1992, Andrew, the season had only 7 named storms, well below average. One of them was Andrew, went from Category 1 to Category 5 in 16 hours, made landfall south of Miami, flattened Homestead, Florida, $27 billion in damage, 65 deaths. Below average season, one storm, near them. In 2004, Charlie, an unusually active season, but the storm that everyone remembers hit Charlotte County, Florida. Not the biggest season, not the most storms, but one was enough. In 2017, Harvey. The season had 17 named storms, above average, but Harvey is what everyone from Houston will tell you about. When Harvey stalled, dumped 60 inches of rain, $125 billion in damage, the costliest hurricane in U.S. history at that point. One storm, near them. So what does the CSU forecast actually mean for you right now? Here is your practical breakdown. If you live on the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, the early season window, June and early July, is your most vulnerable period. El Niño is not yet at full strength. The Gulf water is already warm. Watch carefully any disturbance that forms in the Gulf or Western Caribbean in June and July. It does not need far to travel to reach you. The overall storm count may be down, but the landfall risk numbers tell a more nuanced story for the Gulf Coast. 92.9, the lake. If you live on the East Coast, Carolinas, Virginia, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, your primary risk window is August through October. That is when the Cape Verde storm track, the long track hurricanes from Africa, can survive long enough to reach you even through shear. Major storms in El Niño years still happen. Joaquin in 2015 reached Category 4 before veering out to sea. A slightly different track, and the Carolinas face a direct hit. If you live in the Caribbean, 35% chance of a major hurricane. That is the CSU number, more than 1 in 3. And Melissa hit Jamaica last year at Category 5. The memory is fresh. The infrastructure is still rebuilding. Another hit in 2026, even a weaker one, would be catastrophic on top of still incomplete recovery. Now, I want to address something directly, because someone is always going to say, if it is below average, why do I need to prepare at all? And the answer is the same answer it always has been. Your home does not care about seasonal averages. Your family does not care about the total storm count. A Category 3 eye wall does not check the CSU forecast before deciding to make landfall in your county. As with all hurricane seasons, coastal residents are reminded that it only takes one hurricane making landfall to make it an active season. Colorado State University. 1 hurricane. That is the number. 1. And I am going to say something else, something important. We have been through 2 extremely active seasons back to back. 2024, record warm Atlantic. 2025, 3 Category 5 storms, including Melissa. The 2025 Atlantic hurricane season was an above normal season with 13 named storms, 5 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. 3 hurricanes reached Category 5 intensity: Aaron, Humberto, and Melissa. Colorado State University. 3 Category 5 hurricanes in a single season. 3. And that was 2025. Now, CSU says 2026 will be quieter. And it probably will be. El Niño is real. The shear is real. The physics work. But quiet does not mean safe. Quiet does not mean you unscrew your storm shutters. Quiet does not mean you stop checking the forecast in August. Here is what you should actually do between now and June 1st. And I am going to be specific because general advice does not help. 1. Update your hurricane kit. Not the one from 2023. That water is expired. That radio has dead batteries. Build it fresh. 3 days minimum. 7 days is better. Water, food, medications, documents, phone chargers, cash, torch. 2. Know your evacuation zone. Go to your county emergency management website. Look up your specific address. Know if you are in Zone A, B, C. Know which route you would take and where you would go. Do this now, not on the day a storm is forming. 3. Check your insurance. Hurricane season starts June 1st. Most hurricane insurance has a waiting period when it is activated. In many states, you cannot buy or activate hurricane coverage after a watch or warning is issued. Check your policy. Update your coverage. Do it now. 4. Watch the June 10th update. The CSU team will issue updates to this forecast on June 10th, July 8th, and August 5th. Colo State June 10th is the next CSU update. That is when we will know significantly more about El Niño's development, about the Gulf water temperature trend, about whether the 2023 scenario, warm water defeating El Niño, is repeating itself. If the June 10th forecast shifts upward, pay close attention. And here is my final thought, the one I want to leave you with. For the first time in its 43-year history, CSU used artificial intelligence in this forecast. A machine learning model trained on decades of climate data, finding patterns humans might miss. And it agreed with the human forecasters. Below average season. That is a moment. That is meaningful. 2 completely different methodologies. 1 human-built statistical model with 43 years of history. 1 AI climate emulator running on European weather model predictions, both pointing the same direction, below average. And yet, the traditional statistical model still said slightly above average. The old human method, the one built by watching decades of storms, still said, be careful, the warm water is there, I am watching it, be careful. I am with the old method on that one. Not contradicting the forecast, not saying it is wrong, just saying be careful, because the warm water is there, because the El Niño is not guaranteed to arrive on schedule, because 2023 happened, and because one storm near you changes everything. I will have an update the moment the June 10th forecast drops, the moment NOAA releases their outlook in May, the moment the first June disturbance starts developing in the Gulf. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, because hurricane season 2026 starts in 48 days, and quieter than average is not the same as safe. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.